cane, traffic signals, microwave oven, transport, lobster trap, blood transfusion, sanitary napkin belt. Drum roll, please. No, okay, so, all right, so, nice. The answer is this. The automated elevator, traffic signals, transport cold or frozen goods, blood transfusions, sanitary napkin belt. How many of those got more than 2 right? How many of those got all of them right? Ah, do we? Certainly. We'll see. Women have nothing to do with it. No, I'm doing. No, it's not true. I know. I can't believe I even said that. So we have a few more that are coming in, right? So when they come in and sit down, I'm going to ask this question again. You can't answer it. You can't tell them. That's fine. All right, so we said there were 5 of the 9. And those were the 5. Well, what can you tell us about those 5, Richard? Well, I'm glad you asked. The inventor of the automated elevator, Alexander Miles. We could read this together. Elevators were operated manually. People had to physically open and close the doors of both the elevator and the shaft every time. I'll talk about it a little bit later when I talk a little bit about my history, but for a while I lived in Frankfurt, Germany, and I remember there was a hotel, there was an office building on the military base where there was a little room, and it was the elevator, and there was just a constant belt and a platform that just went all day long. And you stood there. There was no door or anything. You stood there and you waited. Well, came up and you jumped on it, and then it took you on up. And it went around like this. So the other door, when it was coming down, you'd get on it and you'd go down. And I remember thinking, as an engineer, oh my gosh. So all the people that had to get on, and so not a very big space, a little platform. Again, you jumped in and you grabbed the pole, and because that's what went up and down with you. And then when you got to your floor, you come up, and then you step off of it to keep on going. And I'm thinking, if that's the way things were, this idea, and Alexander Miles, I could see it says he was concerned about his daughter. And I could see children trying to use an elevator like that. And you know how children can be, ooh, let me see how far next thing you know. So anyway, so 1838 to 1918, he was inducted to the National Inventors Hall of Fame, African American, yeah? Garrett Morgan, the traffic signal. This is an interesting story. So I'm a civil engineer and specialize in transportation. So this guy has a, let's see, one of his most prominent inventions was the traffic signal. Not just a traffic signal, because they had traffic signals before him. They had signs that would go, and then stop, and then go. And so if you're driving along, they have this thing called a dilemma zone, which you don't need to get into unless you're a traffic engineer. But if you're driving along and you're doing 30 miles an hour or 20 miles an hour, and it's go, and then it just hits stop, that means stop on a dime, and that was not the best way to do it because nobody could stop on a dime. This gentleman, and there were several things like that. There was a green light and a red light. There's stop and go. But this gentleman came up with the concept of a stop, a yellow, and a go, green, right? So red, yellow, and green. That took off, saved lives, and is used everywhere around the world today. And that was another African American. But what's interesting about him, he also, in 1912, and remember his life was 1877 to 1963. In 1912, he received a patent for his breathing device, and that's basically like a gas mask, which is one of the earliest versions of the gas mask was used to save a lot of lives in World War I. So he had a business. He started a business, and he was selling those. Well, in Cleveland, there was this big explosion in 1916. They were drilling a new tunnel under Lake Erie, and they hit a gas pocket, explosion, lots of fumes, people were dying. And so, Garrett Morgan heard about the explosion. He and his brother put on these breathing devices, made their way to the tunnel, and they were able to go down there and save some lives as a result. Nobody asked them to go. Nobody had gas masks back then, but they had that product. He had invented it. He said, hey, what a great opportunity to be able to advertise this thing, right? And go and actually save lives and show how good it was, which was a really good thing that he was able to do. The sad part, despite his heroic efforts, the publicity that Morgan garnered from the incident hurt his sales. The public was not fully aware that Morgan was black. And because he's black, I'm not buying anything made by some black guy, because for whatever reason, adding to the detriment, neither the inventor nor his brother were fully recognized for their heroic efforts. Additionally, some reports of the explosion named others that came in and saved them. So that's kind of what Garrett Morgan, in addition to the traffic signals, just some of the things that people had to endure. So that was traffic signals. Transport refrigerated goods. And this gentleman, Frederick McKinley Jones, 1893, let's see, to 1961, left his market development refrigeration equipment, receiving over 40 patents for it. And so every truck that you see out there that's hauling the milk to the store is as a result of what this man invented for us. We never think about that. But I don't know if we can even imagine what it's like to go to the store and not have cold items that aren't spoiled, that have been shipped. And also on containers, also on rail cars, also on planes. Have you anyone here ever heard the name Thermo King? Some of you may have. Well, that's him. His creation, the Thermo King, allowed people to eat fresh food year-round. Also contributed to the preservation of blood and medicine, proving to be particularly useful in World War II. First African-American to receive the National Medal of Technology. How many of you learned about him in school? Nobody? Really? Yeah, me either. Let's see. Charles Richard Drew, American surgeon and medical researcher, went to high school in D.C. And later became a doctor and professor at Howard University, right here. Developed improved techniques for blood storage and applied his expert knowledge to developing large-scale blood banks. Early in World War II, this allowed medics to save thousands of Allied forces' lives during the war. So in fact, I don't know if you know this, well, if you could imagine folks were injured, blood loss, whether it were crashes, accidents, or bullet wounds or whatever, blood loss. A way to get blood to those folks were blood transfusions. And we can thank this gentleman for coming up with a way to perfect that, because there wasn't a really good way to do that. That was effective until he came up with that solution. It was reported that Dr. Drew was refused a blood transfusion that he perfected when he was in an automobile accident taken to a white hospital in North Carolina. This is what's reported, and if you ever anybody here watch the show MASH? Pretty good show. I mean, it had a long run. They actually did an episode on that, and I think there were some soldiers that came in, needed blood, and they referred to this gentleman in that episode, but there were some soldiers that came in that were white, and they needed blood, and there were some black soldiers that were given blood, and it was like, oh no, I'd rather die than have blood from an African American, from a black person. Well, this gentleman knew that there was no difference, right? In fact, Let's see. Drew's work led to his appointment as director of the first American Red Cross blood bank that ever existed. In 41, he also invented what would later be known as bloodmobiles, and you have seen those, right? You go up there and walk up in, and next thing you know, he's there this week or this couple of days. That was his invention, his idea. The blood bank supplied and started the concept and idea of the blood bank. The blood bank supplied blood to the U.S. Army and the Navy, who initially rejected blood of African Americans and later accepted only if it were stored separately from that of whites. This is the world we lived in, and this is probably one of the reasons we just don't hear very much about African American contributions to the greatness of our country. Drew objected to the exclusion of African Americans' blood from Plaza Supply, and in 1942, he resigned his post. Probably pretty tough to reach that level, to be the director, and then recognize that this is just not right, and have to walk away from that. No telling what he could have done had he stayed, but in 1942, he resigned in protest, right? Okay, so Mary Beatrice Davidson Kinner. Though she filed a total of 5 patents, she's thought to be one of the most forgotten black inventors. She patented the sanitary belt in 1957, which was adjustable and had a moisture-proof napkin pocket in time when women were still using cloth pads. Now maybe there's a reason I never heard about this one, but it's still, I think that was a pretty big leap forward in sanitary conditions for women. She was, again, self-taught inventor. She also created a serving tray that could be attached to a walking frame, a toilet tissue holder, and that last one I'd really like to see, the back washer that could be mounted on the wall of a shower. I'd really like to see that invention. But these are just 5 African Americans that have created things that have made life better, safer for the American people and people around the world that we never hear about, never heard about. So I'm glad you stayed to learn a little bit about these 5. I mean, we may wind up, we'll have to talk to Carl and Maggie and perhaps after the services this month, we may do something like this each time where there'll be a couple of other people that'll ask you the question, and afterwards we'll learn a little bit about those individuals before we dive deeper into our own. Speaking of diving deeper into our own, a brief history of Richard B. Easley, and that would be me. There's a lot of people that don't know anything about me, but have known me. People that I know and love, and people that know and love me, but really don't know anything about me. And it's kind of, well, I'll try to tell you a little bit. Let's see. Born an Army brat, meaning my dad was in the Army. He was an enlisted man. He was a medic, right? And I was born in Okinawa. At the time, in 1961, Okinawa was not part of Japan. It was later annexed afterwards. But when I was there, it was just Okinawa. It wasn't Okinawa, Japan. Today, it's Okinawa, Japan. My dad finished high school, joined the Army, served as a medic, and my mother never completed high school, but she did get her GED. I think I was 10 years old when she did. She studied and she got her GED. Let's see. That was her in 7th grade. That was Bobby Jean Hill Easley. And that was my dad shortly after high school, a picture of him that I have. That was, believe it or not, yours truly in Okinawa as a young whippersnapper. And my dad and my older brother, 3 years older than me, and my dad's holding me. That's in Okinawa at the quarters for military there on one of the bases. That was my mom, and I liked to drive in nice cars back then too, so apparently this picture shows me doing that. These 4 people The one in the front that's wearing a dress, looks like, that's not a dress. That's my grandfather, Coy Hill. And that's the day he was baptized. And those of you may recall that there are certain outfits that you wear, and that was what was worn then when you were being baptized. That was my grandfather. That is a picture found of my great-grandfather. What's his name? I don't know. I just know he's my great-grandfather. And that is my great-grandmother. And she's descended, and I have seen some records that someone kept that of full-blooded Cherokee is in our family, was married in there. So that's my great-grandmother. And that is my great-great-grandfather. Way back. And I have these photos because another relative had passed and had a bunch of pictures, and I said, can I have some of those? And they explained. And a lot of you know your history of your family. Well, my history goes back to the Mayflower, and then actually before the Mayflower, when we had the castle. You know, this is all I know. It's what you're seeing right now as far as my history. And that's my great-great-grandfather. That's my great-great-grandmother. And in her life, she had taken other children that needed care to raise them as well. And that's what I know about my past, my family. Now, experiences that shape. Family, we followed our military assignments. As you know, I was born in Okinawa, right? I was there for maybe 2 years. And then we moved from there to a base called Presidio in San Francisco. So we lived in San Francisco, and from there we moved to Dad was stationed at what's called Site 23. It was a military facility. There were no quarters there, but it was in Ankara, Turkey. Because he had to go to work to the facility, the families lived what we called on the economy. We lived in housing just like everybody else, not military related. So that's where I learned to ride a bicycle, and that's also where I learned to hate shots. But that's another story. Needles, I don't like needles at all. And from there we moved to Philadelphia, and we moved to Philadelphia because my mom said after a year in Ankara, Turkey, and there I have experiences with each of those, and I'll briefly tell you. Ankara was the two firsts that I remember and will always remember in Ankara, Turkey. Number one was because we lived on the economy, we had been in star apartments and lots of Turkish people, and I had friends. I was 5 years old. We didn't have kindergarten to go to, but I was 5 years old, big play area out there, and I had Turkish friends, and I remember Dad called me, hey, Richard, we got to go so-and-so, so I came down to the playground area, and we were walking to the car, and one of my friends walked with me, and this I won't forget. We were walking together, and my other Turkish friend, who's probably 5 years old as well, grabbed my hand to hold my hand while we walked with my dad, and I yanked my hand away from him, and I was too young to be homophobic or anything like that, right? So it didn't have anything to do with that. But I was kind of, why are you holding my hand? And then my dad explained to me, Richard, that's, and I can't remember what the young child's name was. That's their way of letting you know that you're a good friend. They hold hands when they walk together. And I thought, oh, okay. Now that was the beginning of an understanding that because things aren't the way they are in one neighborhood or one country doesn't mean they're wrong in another one, right? And unfortunately to this day there are still people that don't understand that. I do understand that. That was part of the learning process. The other thing in Turkey that I remember is Mom and I walking down the street and people driving by yelling at us and spitting on my mom as they drove by. As we were walking, and that really, really confused me, something fierce, because I didn't understand at 5 years old. They don't even know who we are. A, it's rude if you did, but B, they don't know who we are, and why are they spitting on us? Didn't understand, and so that was kind of an introduction to certain segments of humanity that we would deal with. So Ankara. Then we anyway, after 1 year there of a 3-year assignment, Mom said, "That's it, I'm out of here, I'm going to Philadelphia." And so she took my brother and I, which means my dad's tour of 3 years now dropped to 2, because without dependents, it's only 2 years. So we moved to Philadelphia, and that's where I went to first grade. And then Dad came over after 1 more year in Turkey. Philadelphia, moved to San Antonio. From there, we moved to a place called Roswell, New Mexico. Apparently, some of you have heard of Roswell, New Mexico. Yeah, so we lived there for a year. It was a very interesting time. And from there, we moved to a place called White Sands Missile Range, also in New Mexico, and lived there for a few years. And from there, we moved up to Walter Reed Army Medical Center right here in Washington, D.C. And we were here for 1 year. And then Dad got orders to go to Camp Zama, which is outside of Tokyo in Japan. Another place that I lived that lots of lessons learned. For one, Japanese in Japan, American kid, they use yen, not dollars, of course, but at 12 and 13 years of age, I could go to any bar, any discotheque downtown Tokyo, put my yen up on the table, and I have a sake, a slow gin fizz, and whatever else I wanted to drink. Of course, my parents didn't know anything about this. The other thing that was very revealing to me about the time in Japan is we all have our gifts, and we have our brains work in certain ways, right? Well, the way mine worked, and I learned, was that you left base and you drove to wherever you're going. Japan and the Tokyo region is very populated. It's not like there's long stretches of highway with nothing. I mean, it's just things everywhere. Busy streets, communities. What I learned is when we would go to, Dad would take us to Japan, I mean, to take us to Tokyo for whatever reason, we'd have to go down to Tokyo or Yokohama or someplace. The gift that I had was that I would see how we'd get there, because there are no English, right? So everything you saw, like now you go somewhere, get off the next exit, or turn right on Johnson Street. There's no street signs, no nothing. But going through all these communities, for some reason my brain always remembered that. I could always go back there or back, having gone one time. And we're talking about 2.5, 3-hour drives through communities and city streets and what have you. So I remember that. And as a result, my brother, who was 17 and he had his driver's license to drive on base, and I was 14, we would sometimes sneak off base, even though we weren't supposed to. He said, "Let's go to Tokyo." And so Otha and his friends, his seniors in high school, would want to go to Tokyo, but nobody knew how to get there. Guess what? My gift meant that I got to go, and I always got to sit in the front seat. So that was one of those things in Japan that was good. And then San Antonio, Texas, where we came back to Fort Sam Houston and finished high school there. Frankfurt, Germany is after high school. Dad, I went over to spend the summer with Dad and had quite an experience there in Germany as well. Now, bad advice. Bad advice. Went to Cole High School, and I played basketball. I learned a lot about teamwork, had really close friends. We were not only district champions, we were bi-district champions, and when I see my friends, it all comes back, and we talk about our old stories and how much fun we had, and it was really good. Well, one of the players, lifelong friends, one of the players that was on the team with me, and by the way, district champions, bi-district champions, and when you go to my high school there, you'll see a trophy in the case, and there's my name on it, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's pretty darn good. Now, the bad advice. One of the guys that was on the team with me went to college, became a coach, came back to Cole High School, and I lived in Austin at the time. Sharon and I lived right outside of Austin, and he called me, "Hey, Richard, we got we're going to make it to regionals and potentially the state championship game." I was like, "Oh, okay, that's good, man, good." and he was a coach. And I said, you got to see this kid. He's really good. We got all kinds of people coming to our high school that want to scout him and stuff. You need to see him, and he's just that good. And I said, well, sure, I'll come see a game. So I went to see a game, and the kid was really good. He was really, really good. And then Herb came to me and said, hey, Rich, come on back after the game in the locker room, and I want him to meet you. So I went back there, and there he was, and there was his father. And I said, hey, look, kid, you were like a man among children out there. Your unselfish basketball play was really, really good. Again, bad advice here. It was really, really good, but at any point, you could break an ankle, you can do something, and that basketball career is over. You got to stay on the books. You got to keep your nose in the books and do well in school. And his father was there, and his father said, see, son, that's the same thing I've been telling him. That's the same thing. Well, now when you go to my high school, you'll see another trophy, but it's the state championship trophy, and you'll see that kid's name, and his name is Shaquille O'Neal. That's where the bad advice came in, right? So I was like, no, don't put too much stock in basketball. You got to stay in the books. By the way, he has a PhD. I mean, you know who he is. So I think that he probably did well on doing what he did, not what I just advised him to do. So bad advice. This one. I'm sorry? I know. He could have. That's a possibility. That was my thinking as well. Engineering, a logical choice of three choices. For me, now I'm getting a little bit older, right? I'm going to go to college. Dad didn't go to college. Mom didn't go to college. And I thought you only went to college for three reasons. One of those was to be a doctor. The other was to be a lawyer. And the third reason that you went to college was to be an engineer. Now, be a doctor, you go to college, and then you have to go to medical school. To be a lawyer, you go to college, then you have to go to law school. To be an engineer, you go to college, and then you can make money. Okay, that's it. I'm going to become an engineer. And so I did. Math is the foundation of engineering, right? So I think we all know that. But when I went to college, which is where I met Sharon at UT at El Paso, but when I went to college, I took a class called pre-calculus along with my other classes. Pre-calculus is what you take before you take calculus, and then pretty much all your engineering classes are calculus-based, so you've got to get through calculus first. So I took pre-calculus. Maybe I wasn't the most studious kid, but I flunked pre-calculus. So I said, okay, I'll take it again because I think I know what I did wrong. And I took it a second time, and I flunked it a second time. So I think I got this third time. So you know what they say, third time's a charm. So I took it the third time, and I flunked it a third time. Now, at this point, my GPA is going down so low, and all my engineering classes are calculus-based, so I can't take those. And so a friend of mine said, hey, Richard, you know what you ought to do? Really, pre-calculus is a hard class. Calculus is much easier than pre-cal. So I thought, really? Because I'm having trouble. 3 times I failed pre-cal. So back in those days, they had punch cards in registration. In the gymnasium, you went around to different stations for different classes. And I went to the math station, and I said, well, I'm going to take calculus. And there were pretty much all the calculus classes were gone except one class, and I took the card. And I said, I'd like to go ahead and register for the calculus class. And the lady looked at me and said, you can't take calculus without taking pre-calculus. Have you taken pre-calculus? And I looked her right in the eye and said, I certainly have, right? So, so I took calculus. And I thought, well, we'll see. I hope this is easier than pre-cal because it was tough. And I go in there that first day of class, and I sit down there. A bunch of people, it's a crowded classroom, and the teacher comes in and says, Buenos días, estudiantes. And then I realized this is calculus taught in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, so I kind of looked around, grabbed my books, got up, so I dropped that class. Next semester, I think I could do pre-calculus. I took pre-calculus one more time. And when I took pre-calculus the fourth time, you're right, I failed it again. Now, at this point, Dad's in Germany. He's remarried in Germany. Mom, and I didn't mention this anywhere else, but my mom suffered with mental illness all of my life. So in and out of mental hospitals, paranoid schizophrenia. So she was on the street, not drug abuser, not alcohol, just she knew people were out to hurt her, so she couldn't stay anywhere for very long. And so I knew that was not a place that I could go to her or to Dad in Germany, but I had flunked it the fourth time. Now you're not on suspension. You're not on probation, you're on suspension, so I couldn't stay in school. And so I went to the dean, and it was kind of like put on my best pleading mask, and went and said, please, I don't have anywhere to go, please help, because I lived in the dorms on campus, well, let's take a look at your transcript. And it turns out I flunked pre-calculus 4 times. They said, okay, here's what's going on. You flunked it the first time. Your GPA went down. You flunked it the second time, but it was the same class. That should not have impacted your GPA. The third time should not have impacted. The fourth time should not. Actually, Richard, you're in good standing. You're not suspended. But we need to get you in algebra and trigonometry class, because I never had that in high school. My senior year in high school was geometry, and that's a really low foundation, certainly to try to take pre-calculus. I didn't know that. I also knew that when the transcript came from Japan, they decided, well, we need to put you in consumer math, where you learn how to make change if you go to the store, where a lot of the other students were in Algebra 1 at that point, and they finished with trig. I didn't get anywhere near that level. So I took those classes, and I did well in that, and I decided to transfer to go to an associate's program, civil engineering technology program, which I didn't require calculus, and did pretty well. I graduated and took a job with the city of Austin. I did get an Associate of Applied Science in Civil Engineering Technology. I worked for the city of Austin as a construction inspector. Okay, so I was City of Austin construction inspector, and I worked with a lot of engineers as a construction inspector, engineers that were designing the streets and drainage in Austin, Texas. And I realized a lot of them were making mistakes, and a lot of them were asking me, and I was also helping them to fix the mistakes. And I realized those guys weren't any smarter than me, because I believed that I was not capable of getting a college degree, a bachelor's degree. I believed that was beyond me. But working for the city, I learned these people aren't brain scientists. They're no smarter than I am. I need to go back to school. Now, it's a lot different for me, and this is something for kids and grandkids to understand. It's a lot different for me when I went back to school to know what I was going to school for. Right? Before, it was just the engineer. What's that mean? I don't know, but I'm going to go for engineering. But when I know that I've got Sharon with me, I want to have a better life, I have to do what I have to do. It made a big difference. It made a huge difference. So I decided to go back to school, and we lived in Austin, so I applied to the University of Texas at Austin. It's one of the best engineering schools, not just in the United States, but in the world in civil engineering. And when I applied, I got my letter, and I could see laughter in the words of the letter. You want to come here? Obviously, it was a pretty serious rejection letter. You need to go somewhere else, perhaps back to UT at El Paso. And I thought, okay, well, that's not going to happen. I don't want to go back to El Paso. So I decided to go to the community college. Really best advice, good advice. So I went to the community college. I needed to enroll. They looked at my transcript, certainly, come on in. Looks like you had trigonometry and algebra 2, which I did before I left at UTEP. You were ready to go straight into calculus 1. We'll put you in calculus. And I said, no, I want to take pre-calculus. No, you don't need pre-calculus. I said, no, you don't understand. I need pre-calculus. I need to go in that class. So I took the pre-calculus class there at community college, and I got an A in it. Then I took calculus 1, and I got an A in it. I took calculus 2, and I got an A. And these are some of the highest grades in the class. Then I took differential equations, a higher level class, and I got an A in that as well. Now, at this point, I had the foundation that I didn't know that I didn't have. And I got my degree. But while I was going to school, I worked at Texas Department of Transportation. This isn't to talk about racism, although my life is filled with things dealing with that. But I will share one of the things there at TxDOT when I worked there. I worked in the bridge inspection division there in the Austin district. And I was one of the only black people there. But we're there looking at this bridge that we have to do the inspections on. It's a many segmented bridge. It's a long bridge. So we're planning a kind of a plan of attack. Okay, so we'll set up over here, we'll do this, and then we'll check the foundation here, and we'll do all these things, and we'll work and get this bridge knocked out. So it's about 6 of us, and I'm an engineering tech 3 at that point. Starts at 1, then 2, then 3. And we're working, and then I think we've got a plan. And this guy comes in, a visitor to the TxDOT office, wearing a suit, comes in, probably an engineer. And we're standing there, and he walks over, excuse me, guys. And he taps me on the shoulder, and he says, I just want to let you know, we're out of toilet paper in the bathroom. And I remember thinking, so you just assume that this black guy probably was a janitor. And you know what I said to him? No, of course you don't. What I said to him was, thank you for letting us know. I'll see if we can let somebody know they can get that taken care of. But that's what I said on the outside. It's not what I said or I heard I was on the inside. So, TxDOT, and I took an internship with Exxon. And I will tell you, Sharon and I, Exxon was an experience for summer internship. I worked for TxDOT. TxDOT, if you have to travel, and they don't want you to travel overnight, but if you did, you got like $7 for breakfast, like $12 for lunch, and maybe $18, $19 for dinner per diem. And Motel 6 was your friend because you just couldn't afford to stay anywhere else. So as an older student, somehow I got into, a person met me and said, we need you to help us here at Exxon develop a program, a certification program for building gas stations nationwide, because I had a construction background. I remember my first travel trip. I had to fly over to Florida, there from Houston, because I did the internship in Houston. And they put you in first class. They only fly first class. Now, I had never even, first class, does that exist? I didn't know what those chairs were when you get to the back of the plane. But anyway, so it was first class. So that was like a really big experience for me. And then, of course, when you get your rental car, because of the Exxon account, it's either going to be a new Cadillac or a new Lincoln Continental, whatever it is, that car. Sharon and I are used to doing a car that used to be called the Geo Metro. It's a small vehicle. No joke. That's what we rented because that's what we could afford. So now I'm in one of these large cars. Oh, and we're the reservations at the Hyatt. Okay, so Motel 6, Hyatt, big difference. And the per diem. Well, the per diem was, Exxon's philosophy was, we don't like to have to take you away from your family, so we want to make you as comfortable as possible. So per diem is whatever you want, whatever you want. So Hyatt, you have lobster on the menu and it's market price? Makes no difference. I'll have the lobster. I didn't do that every time, but I was able to do that a time or two, it's a whole new world that opened up for me and Sharon to see that there's another way to live other than what we were used to. Washington, D.C., came up to D.C. After I had graduated, took a position here, wound up with these 4 educational degrees, Associate's Applied Science and Civil Engineering Technology, Associate's Science in Mathematics, Bachelor of Science and Master of Science in Civil Engineering at the University of Texas at Austin. By the way, when I applied to UT after ACC, I reapplied, and the letter said, congratulations, you're in, and we have a scholarship for you. which was quite a big difference from the first time that I applied. I started my company just over 25 years ago, E-Squared Engineering, and we do work in 34 states and 25 countries. You've met Sharon before, and that's the entirety of E-Squared Engineering. I like to say we're really small, but we're really good at what we do. And we're in demand, and we're very thankful to God for what He's allowed us to do, considering started the company 25 years ago with really, I think, enough money to pay our mortgage for 2 months, and then that was it. And I'm very blessed to have Sharon with me, because it was one of those things where, Sharon, I know this doesn't feel right, what I've been doing. I think this is the right thing to start this company. And I have to say that we had just bought a house in Ashburn, like 5 months prior. So the mortgage was pretty big. And I said, you know, we may lose this house, but I believe that what's in front of us is better than where we are now. And sometimes you have to take one step back to take 2 steps forward. And if what I think our future could be, that we gave that up to keep this house, that just doesn't work for me. We can get another house. I think the future is much brighter. It turns out we didn't have to give up the house, but we were ready, and I had a partner who believed in me enough to say, okay, if we have to give up our home, then we'll give up our home to make this work. So now I do a lot of work, and then I do a lot of committee work. I chair a lot of committees. ITS World Congress, and we do these events in Asia, Europe, and in the Americas. Every year it's one, then the next year it's the other, and the next year it's the other. I serve on the planning committee representing the United States on that one. This next one's in Dubai. In fact, a little later this month, we have our first planning committee for the Dubai Congress. So I'll be over there for that, and have been doing that for about 16 years. There's usually 2 meetings. One's a planning meeting, and then another is the actual Congress, which brings people from all over the world to those congresses. I'm a member of the ITS United Kingdom. United Kingdom, yeah. And a member of ITS Canada. I'm on the board. Yes, sir. What does ITS mean? ITS is the Intelligent Transportation Systems. ITS, things like driverless cars are ITS, toll tags are ITS, navigation systems in your vehicle are ITS. Using a smart card to pay for transit, that's ITS. It's basically advanced technology applied towards transportation. All aspects, ITS. ITS Canada. In fact, I'm on the board of ITS Canada, and the vice chair, the incoming chairman. That's a national organization, and believe it or not, I'm the first and only person that's not Canadian that's been elected to the board and will be the president of that board, which is very humbling to know that they've never even considered anyone outside of Canadian citizenship. Last one. Inducted in the Civil Architectural and Environmental Engineering Academy of Distinguished Alumni. Kind of quarter over on the left, you'll see me. That Academy of Distinguished Alumni, those are the graduates of the University of Texas at Austin in Civil Architecture and Environmental Engineering from the beginning of time that program existed. There are way less than 1% that are inducted into that academy. And I was inducted, and I am the incoming president of that academy. And that academy has members like, anybody ever heard of a guy named Rex Tillerson?
Yes.
He was a Secretary of State, and he's a civil engineer, and he was the chairman, president of ExxonMobil Corporation. Many of the structures around the world, engineering accomplishments around the world that are big were by folks from this. And how in the heck they have invited me to that, who flunked pre-calculus 4 times. And now the incoming president of that, I don't know, but again, very, very, very very humbling experience. Now, St. David's. We've always believed that to whom much is given, much is expected, right? And so since, I think, 1997, 1998, we've been members of St. David's, where mission trips, seven to Honduras, 4 to Liberia, and 1 to Haiti. 2 terms on vestry, chair of the outreach programs, lay reader, chalice bearer, greeter, usher, men's group, becoming beloved community, racial reconciliation, search committee member, and currently our co-chair of the search committee. So there's a lot of things been involved with here because it's really, really important. The mission trip work, I cannot tell you enough about the mission trip work. It's just, every single trip up there has been was life-changing. Some of you have been on mission trips with us together, but that's another presentation in itself. Lastly, the big history part. I'm married to, God has graced me with a partner who from day one has believed in me so much more than I believe in myself. She has, there are things, I think that's the best I can do. And she'd say, no, Richard, you can do better than that. Seriously? Okay, and I'll go back. One stands to mind, I remember writing a paper, and it was African American Studies, I believe it was, during engineering, one of the electives. And I wrote a paper, and I was up most of the night writing it. And I woke her up, Sharon, just take a quick look, because I'm going to go to bed now. And she looked at it and she said, it's kind of, you can do better than that, Richard. Really, you need to go back and do that over again. Seriously, Sharon, I got to turn this thing at 9 o'clock in the morning, and here it is, like, I don't know, 4 in the morning. So I went back and I redid it. And when I turned it in, it was not only the highest grade in the class, but the instructor had all kinds of notes on how impressed he was of what he learned from the paper that I just wrote. And that was just part of what Sharon has done for me when I didn't think I could do it. Anyway, so that's it. That's any questions on I mean, that's what, 62 years in the amount of time that we talked? Yes. I'll let you know. Yes.
Hello. Yeah, there you go. So your experience with calculus is shared, my friend. So for me, it was Calc 2. I failed it twice, and I aced the third time I took it. And what my new instructor that I had on that third time recognized is my weakness was in algebra. And once we figured out algebra was the problem, I aced his final.
There you go.
So common thread.
There you go. You know, and it's I talk to a lot of students. I actually guest lecture at USC, and I guest lecture at UT at Austin, and I guest lecture at the University of Washington on inclusiveness in engineering and planning, because there's a lot of things there. And it's surprising whenever I tell them that story, and I always tell them, this doesn't leave this room. I don't know if I know that I flunked pre-calculus 4 times. The number of students that come up afterwards thinking they're the only ones that they've ever had that happen to. Just to know that everybody doesn't make straight A's. Yes, sir.
So despite like beyond three counts and down, what kind of inspired you to persist?
I don't know. I just wanted to be an engineer. And I knew I didn't want to go to law school or medical school. But I just wanted to be an engineer. And what was weird is that they have ASVAB, which is called Armed Service Vocational Aptitude Battery, that all kids in DOD schools, and I think maybe beyond that, had to take that test. It kind of tells you what you're proficient at. I was like in the 97th percentile in math, right? So I was way up at the top. But I couldn't get past pre-calculus. I didn't quite understand how that was. I mean, now I know, But I knew I could do it, but then I knew I couldn't do it. I just kept trying. And Sharon was there, and what am I going to do? I'll take it again. I'll do better next time. Just kept doing it. Yes, ma'am. Oh, big time. God was there every single step of the way. There are so many things that were doors closed because the bigger ones were open that I didn't know it. I mean, our life has been filled with that. The fact that I'm here now, the fact that I have my own company, E Squared Engineering, that was not planned. I'm not smart enough to be able to plan this life. That was guided. That was guided. Yes.
Two things. One, I did insurance exams on two of the Wizards phenoms, and they've disappeared. I haven't heard about them being great. And I told them, I said, don't party, behave yourself, take care of yourself. But apparently they didn't. And two, the only reason I passed calculus was because he gave multiple choice tests using homework problems that I had worked. But I couldn't repeat them I couldn't show my work. But I knew what the answers were. 4/3 pi r cubed equals the volume of a sphere. And I remember that to this day.
Well, I'm glad your education paid off. Absolutely.
One last question, and then if you want to hang around,
Yes, ma'am.
Richard, first of all, thank you for sharing with us today. That's great. But I wanted to let you know, my father was a senior chemist at Kodak.
Rochester?
Rochester. A lot of engineering. I remember when I was in college, and I hate to tell one more calculus story, but I will. I was forewarned by him. He said, listen, calculus is going to be really tough. I was a business major, a marketing major. And I went to RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and very big in engineering. And he said, I flunked calculus. I couldn't get it. I didn't get it. And I took pre-calc, got an A, first time. So calculus 1, calculus 2, got A's in both. I have never used it since that point. And my question for you is, have you ever used calculus? I'll take that as a no.
I don't know whether I have or not. There are a lot of probably, but it's not a mainstream for sure. Yes, ma'am.
All right.
We're done.
Thank you again.
Oh, you're welcome.
Before we go, I just want to applaud Richard for doing this. This is really the vulnerable in the most courageous way when we tell our story, or part of our story, and reveal who we are, warts and all, and you have been incredibly candid but also inspiring. So thank you for that. And you set a high bar for our next speakers to follow. But thank you all for staying, and thank you, Richard, for being here and sharing your story. There's nothing more powerful. So stay tuned for next story. You're next, Carl? Oh, lucky you, right? Thank you all.